Hello, everybody. So, why not read a little bit more, even during a week in which next Monday we are not having our traditional lesson? We're going to meet at Sagra di Sant'Anna, but why not read a little bit more from our friend Lauri? Bread baking without agony. Seems like a title out of a Shakespeare tragedy, but let's see what happens. It took me a long time to get around to baking a loaf of bread. And when I finally did, I stayed home all day to do it. It seemed such a mysterious and intimidating process. What was kneading, and how did you do it? What happened if the bread did not rise? If it rose too much? Ricordiamoci, rise, rose, risen, salire, gonfiarsi il pane. Kneading sarebbe quella impastare. Suppose it got in the way of a draft. The recipes I read assumed a familiarity I did not possess. A draft è un colpo di aria in qualche senso, quindi se c'era troppo aria il pane si gonfiava troppo o troppo poco. But I figured it couldn't be all that difficult since people had been baking bread since man began. But to put me at ease, I called in a more experienced friend to help me. One gloomy winter day, un aggettivo cambia sempre tutto, we set about to bake. My friend insisted that we do something called setting the sponge, that is, mixing up a little sugar and some of the flour with the yeast and water to get the yeast started. Yeast, adesso non mi sta sfuggendo la parola, eppure dovrei saperlo. Mamma mia, ragazzi, yeast. Lievito, eccolo là. Then we sat around drinking coffee till the sponge got frothy. Froth vuol dire un po' di scumetta. When the rest of the flour was added, my friend showed me how to knead by putting the dough on a floured surface, pushing it away from her, folding it over and pushing it away again, each time giving it a quarter turn. Very soon the dough had the springy, soft texture of a baby's bottom. Colletto di un bambino. I was very impressed. Fammi controllare, mi sta registrando? Yes. We rolled the dough in soft butter and put it in a warm bowl, wrapped it in a warm towel in a warm place to rise, and while we waited, we have 11's. I have no idea. I think it's a cocktail. 11's is. Let's see. What is an 11's? I have no idea. I think it's a cocktail. A light snack and drink, sì. Guarda, un bel modo di dirlo. Se fai un piccolo aperitivo alle 11 si chiama 11's. Pensa a te. I did not know that. About an hour or so later, we peeked under the towel, and I learned what the term double in bulk means. The dough had grown to twice its size. Bulk vuol dire massa. The next thing was to do punch it down or knock it down, as the English say. I found it very satisfying to give that puffy balloon-like dough a good smack, which flattened it down at once. Then, as instructed, I kneaded it again. This time it was springier and seemed to have come back at me. Again the dough was rolled in butter and put in a warm place, all dressed up in its protective snowsuit. Simpatica. Let's go out, I said. Oh no, my friend said. It isn't worth it. We would have to turn around. We would have to turn around. Scusate, ho toccato il microfono, sì? We would have to turn around and come back right anyway. By this time I have began to feel fidgety, nervosa. How long longer will this take? I said. About another 40 minutes to rise, and about an hour or so to bake, she said. Let's have lunch. We had lunch, and then we played a desultory game of Scrabble, punctuated by punching the dough down again, forming it into loaves, and slipping it into buttered loaf pans. We sat around a little while it rose a bit more, and then we baked it. The result was a perfectly nice loaf of bread. But after spending an entire day in its service, I expected something a little more heroic. After this marathon, I did not bake for some time, but I thought about it. I believe that everyone should know how to bake at least one kind of bread as a step towards self-sufficiency, and besides, the bread bought in the store was truly awful. Then another friend gave me a recipe for a 3 cup loaf that took 1 hour to bake, start to finish. I cut my teeth on this loaf, so to speak, and considering its density, it's a wonder I didn't knock them out. Quindi molto duro. This loaf was heavy and tasted heavily of yeast. Blech. Left out for a day, it developed into something that resembled a doorstop. Doorstop, uno scalino davanti alla porta. While I developed a craving for this bread, my affection was not shared, and after I had eaten a few slices, the rest of the loaf was left to languish and eventually produced a lush coat of fur-like blue mold muffa. Nevertheless, I continued to bake it and gave it away to people too. It is unknown what most of them did with it, but I did once bring a loaf as a house present, and the expression on the face of my hostess made me finally realize how unavailable this bread looked. Quindi era proprio un pane duro e brutto. Then I read a book that changed my life, English Bread and Yeast Cookery by Elizabeth David, with American notes by Heron Kess. Isn't it a curiosity that you have a book written in English and then you need an American author to put notes so people can understand it? The incredible thing of English in England and English in America. I read it as if it were a novel. I took it to bed with me and stayed up late to finish it. I did not read it as a housebound person reads a travel book, since was now the mother of an 18-month-old daughter, and I did not see how I could meet the demands of a loaf of bread and pay attention to a child at the same time. But as I read, I came across the interesting fact that bread dough will rise slowly and well at room temperature, which, considering the temperatures of most American houses, means a lukewarm place. Lukewarm, non troppo caldo, non troppo freddo. If left to rise for a long time, only a small quantity of yeast is necessary. The process is rather like marination. It develops the taste of wheat rather than the taste of yeast. And then I read this liberating sentence. It's really a question of arranging matters so that the dough suits your timetable rather than the other way around. Why, you could have knocked me over with a pastry brush. This meant I could mix up the bread in the morning, leave it to rise, and actually go away. I could come home and when I wanted, punch the dough down and let it rise all afternoon if needed to. Or I could take my daughter to the park, come home, punch the dough down, give it a short second rise, and bake it during nap time. La nonna. The idea that bread baking was something that would accommodate itself to me was downright thrilling. The next morning, I embarked on a bloomer loaf, a whole wheat baguette, whole wheat integrale, baguette shaped bread. Unlike many recipes, this one had no setting of the sponge and no proofing the yeast with sugar. Preparare, in questo caso proof. The ingredients were flour, water, yeast, salt, and a little milk. Most recipes tell you to coat the dough with butter or oil to keep it from sticking to the bowl. This recipe asks you to roll it in flour, which in my opinion gives it a better crust, if it is baked on a flour rather than a greased baking sheet. And of course, most recipes state that bread dough is fussy. L'abbiamo imparato l'altra volta, fussy. It must be treated with extreme care, put in a warm place and wrapped up tight. This recipe called for a warm bowl, a towel, and a cool place. I did as I was instructed, put the bowl on my dining room table, and then my daughter and I went about our business. 3 hours later, we returned. I punched the dough down, gave it a second kneading, gave my daughter her lunch, and put her in for a nap. An hour before she woke up, I formed the loaf, slashed the top with 4 diagonal cuts, brushed it with water, and set it in the oven. The result was absolutely breathtaking. I could not believe I had baked such a perfect loaf of bread. A dark brown crust, a beautiful smell. I let it cool down, and when I cut it, it had air holes, just like a loaf from French bakery. Furthermore, it was delicious, wheaty, light, but not at all airy. Everyone loved it, and I assumed it was beginner's luck. It was not, for I have now made this bread over and over, with varying proportions of white to whole wheat flour. I have added wheat germ or corn germ, germe di grano, germe di mais, Made it with all water, no milk, let it rise all day, half a day, with a short first rise or short second one. One afternoon I was about to leave the house when I realized that the second rising was probably over and I had forgotten about baking. So I punched the dough down again and let it rise a third time, and the resulting loaf was one dinner guests tore apart with their hands. The second best thing about this bread, the first is its taste, is that, unlike most things in life, it adjusts to you. Before starting out, there are a few things to consider. Although perfectly good bread can be made using whole wheat flour from the supermarket, it goes without saying that the better the flour, the better the bread. Just like wine. Better the grapes, better the wine. Health food stores often stock excellent flours in bulk. In bulk vuol dire non, come si può dire in bulk? Senza confezione, quindi si può comprare così. C'è anche un negozio bellissimo che si chiama The Bulk Barn, where you buy everything in bulk. It's beautiful. You go inside and everything is in bulk. So you can buy spices and everything. You just fill your bag to whatever pasta. There's many in Toronto. Very nice. The Bulk Barn. In bulk, all'ingrosso, eccolo là, cosa vuol dire? Large quantity at a reduced price, ovviamente, because it's not packaged, it's loose. Some of them organic. One such is Walnut Acres, Penns Creek, Pennsylvania, which has bread flour that turns tan when water is added, makes an excellent loaf, quindi cambia un po' colore, un po' marroncino. There are often wonderful flours available at farmers markets, and some people are lucky enough to live near a mill, molino. Sea salt is purer and saltier than any commercial salt, and it is not mere nicety to use filtered water. Non è una carineria, ha un suo effetto. As for yeast, I use preservative-free yeast from Walnut Acres, which I buy in quantity and keep in the refrigerator. The finest loaves I ever made, however, use fresh yeast, which you can sometimes buy at the supermarket, sometimes beg from a friendly bakery. Quindi puoi elemosinarlo quasi. Home baked bread of any kind is better than anything you can buy at the grocery store. This, of course, is not saying much, since most commercial bread has the taste and texture of cellulose sponge. This is not a mystery, and in fact, there was an article recently, American bread is not bread. I was reading about this. Um, you can, if you're interested, it's really strange. It's not bread. They use a lot of, additives and preservatives, etc. And it's really, really strange. I have home baked bread is better than you can buy at the grocery store. This, of course, is not saying much, since most commercial bread has the taste and texture of cellulose sponge. Long risen bread, a lunga fermentazione, si potrebbe dire, however, is better than anything you can get from a fancy bakery. I have tinkered. To tinker vuol dire sperimentare with original recipe until I found the bread I like the best, one that manages to be dense and light at the same time. For one loaf, into a large bread bowl, put 1.5 cups unbleached white flour. Senza unbleached vuol dire senza, no. Bleach diventa bianco per conto suo. Bleach, mi manca, è la varchina. Chemical process, exposure, quindi fatto più veloce. Bleach flour, how it is made, which is incredible, really. Removing the pigment, this process will turn flowers chemicals like sodium chloride or hydrogen peroxide, sì, quindi il bianco viene usato con sistemi chimici. Right, so she's saying unbleached. whole wheat flour, and 3/4 cup coarse ground whole wheat flour. If you can't find coarse, ruvido, simply add regular whole wheat flour. Add 1 heaping teaspoon, quindi heaping a heap è tanto, quindi un teaspoon abbondante, salt, and 1 tablespoon wheat or corn germe di grano. Mix half a scant, quindi scant vuol dire scarso, teaspoon of yeast with 1.5 cups liquid, half milk, half water, or more water than milk, whatever you have to hand. If you're going to leave it overnight, use 1/4 teaspoon yeast. Pour the liquid into the flour, stir it up. The dough should be neither dry nor sticky, but could tend more towards the sticky than the dry. If too sticky, knead in a little more flour. Knead the dough well, roll it in flour, put it in a warm bowl, although I have put it in a regular old bowl right off the shelf. Leave it in a cool, draft-free place, senza aria, and go about your business. Whenever you happen to get home, punch down the dough, knead it well, roll it in flour, and forget about it until convenient. Sometime later, with a long first rise, a short second rise is fine, but a long one is fine too. Punch the dough down, give it a final kneading, shape it into a baguette, slash the top with 4 diagonal cuts, brush with water, and let proof for a few minutes. Quindi lasciarlo stare. And if you haven't the time, it can go straight into the oven. You can preheat the oven and put it in a cold oven. It matters not a bit. Che bella espressione. Non cambia nulla. It matters not a bit. Beautiful. Bake at 450 for half an hour. Turn the oven to 425 Fahrenheit, obviously, and bake for another 20 minutes. Bread like this will astonish your friends. It makes a perfect house present. Even if the crust splits during baking, it's still a wonderful looking loaf. The actual man work, so to speak, is under half an hour. Ore lavoro. The yeast does not rest for you. You, of course, get all the credit. Fantastic. Oh, mi sa che questa domenica ci provo.